You are currently seeing a world rife with pandemics, but in this video, we will be facing far more deadly and serious problems in this world. For example, the injustice where your thoughts and the fact that you have no security matter for nothing. Compared to today, millions of people are starving and thousands are dying of starvation. And we will face the problems of a technology that lags behind, where the screens you are currently watching do not exist. Because we're going to a world where the First World War never happened, together with you, and there's more. But first, let's briefly touch on how the First World War began. In 1914, Franz Ferdinand, a prominent leader of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was shot and killed by an assassin during a visit to Sarajevo. Following this incident, Austria declared war on Serbia. At that time, there were friendship treaties between the countries designed to protect one another. Because of these treaties, when one country entered the war, other countries joined the war in turn to offer their support. And so, a local incident turned into a massive war involving the whole world within a month. And if you're ready, let's get started. Everything begins in this world. That is to say, amongst the empires. The First World War marked the end of large, multi-ethnic empires as we know them. However, had this war never taken place, colossal empires such as the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and the Russian Empire would have continued to look out for one another in order to survive. This situation would be more like living on top of a massive powder keg, ready to explode at any moment, than enjoying the peace and stability of today's nation-states. People would wake up not asking, will democracy come, but fearing, which emperor will cross our border tomorrow, driven by imperial ambition. As no global peace organization or diplomatic language had developed, each country turned in on itself and viewed its neighbor as an absolute threat. This endless diplomatic tension and the power displays of the great powers instilled a constant fear of catastrophe in people's minds, and the world never truly found peace. Well, let's see what else is in store for us. Because every problem we'll face in this video will be many times more challenging than the last. In fact, we will eventually be faced with epidemics caused by viruses and bacteria. But now we're going to try to stand up for our rights, one way or another. Social rights and modern legal principles are often established in the wake of great tragedies, with the vow, never again. Women's entry into the workforce and their attainment of the right to vote gained momentum following the vital roles they played behind the front lines during the First World War. Human rights declarations are the result of the great sacrifices made. Had there been no war, those old and rigid class structures would have remained intact for much longer. People would have lived in fear of being denied their inherent rights, of being unable to make their voices heard, and of being crushed under the injustice of arbitrary rule. In a world where rules develop slowly and blood ties are valued over merit, this would mean that the individual has no security whatsoever. Being unable to find a global conscience or legal norm to turn to when wronged would become the modern individual's greatest spiritual prison. At the end of the video, you'll see a graph showing the number of casualties among the countries that took part in the First World War. If your country was among them, don't forget to mention your country's flag in the comments. Let's see how much of a challenge the third problem will be for us. Hunger and famine. The endless variety we see on supermarket shelves today is, in fact, a legacy of wartime logistics. The First World War created the need to feed millions of soldiers simultaneously and rapidly. This led to a revolution in everything from canning techniques to food transport. Had this need not arisen, modern farming methods and the global food supply chain would have been established much later. People would have continued to live with that age-old fear of remaining dependent on local harvests. Will there be enough food this winter? A drought in one region would have meant millions going hungry, as there was no intercontinental network of mutual aid. The inability to store food for long periods or transport it over long distances remained a constant source of worry for every family. Hunger remained a monster that could knock on the door of all humanity at any moment, not just the poor. Even now, millions of people are condemned to starvation. But if it hadn't been for the First World War, who knows, perhaps you and I would be condemned to starvation right now. If you're not hungry, let's move on to the next question. Technology is generally a byproduct of military needs. The forerunners of the smartphones, the internet, and computers that we can't put down today were born in military laboratories designed to crack codes, establish rapid communication, or see further afield. If there had been no war, the world would have remained analog for much longer. It would have taken weeks for information to travel from one end of the world to the other, leaving people in a state of great uncertainty. Not knowing what was happening in another country would have led to the rapid spread of false news and social paranoia. People feared being left in the dark, living cut off from the world, and problems that could not be solved due to technical limitations. Technological backwardness meant not only a lack of comfort, but also that the cold fear born of ignorance and uncertainty came to dominate the modern world. You wouldn't be able to watch me right now, and you wouldn't be able to subscribe to my channel either. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can support me by subscribing to the channel. On this channel, I explore history's turning points by asking what-if questions to discover what might have awaited us had history taken a completely different course. Through my own narrative style, I transform history from a boring lesson into something engaging. Is there a topic you've ever thought, what if? If so, don't forget to mention it in the comments. Now, however, we are about to face the deadliest problem on Earth. The most brutal aspect of war is death, yet this mass of deaths has accelerated medical progress more than ever before. Had there not been a major war, dying from a simple infection might still be our greatest nightmare today. The path leading to modern surgery, blood transfusion techniques, and the discovery of antibiotics was paved by the necessity of saving the seriously wounded on the front line. Had it not been for the pressures of war, the medical world would likely have been far more conservative and progressed at a much slower pace. A routine service you receive when you visit a hospital today might well have been regarded as a miracle in those days. People lived in constant fear of being completely defenseless in the face of a widespread epidemic or an incurable wound. As the healthcare system lagged behind for decades, invisible killers, that is, viruses and bacteria, continued to be society's greatest and most real fear. If it had been a conventional war, the loss of life would have resulted from epidemics and conflicts between nations. But when we speak of a world war, it means that everyone across the globe was suddenly facing death head-on, and this graph proves exactly that. If this war had not broken out, we would have been caught between the vast empires to face injustice without any safeguards, ranging from falling behind in technology to not subscribing to my channel, and finally, we would have been struggling to survive whilst battling illness in a world teeming with viruses. Well, which world do you think is more frightening? This world which is rapidly evolving through suffering, or a world that is safe but stagnant, living in the shadow of old fears?